Okay, so welcome back. Now today we're going to jump in and start writing code in Visual Basic in Excel, and we're going to start to develop this application here. And it's a fairly simple application, and it should give us a good opportunity to learn some of the functionality in VBA in Excel. It basically just takes some user input data and then calculates and plots a waveform on a chart. Pretty straightforward. Now, I encourage you to look at some of the other videos in this series where we talk about what is Visual Basic in Excel, what is its functionality. We talk about how to configure what we're going to be working with today, which is the IDE, Integrated Development Environment, where you actually write your code, your Visual Basic code, to access your spreadsheet data. And we also talked about one of the most important parts of all this is being able to access cells and ranges of cells in your spreadsheet from your Visual Basic code. So I encourage you to look at those. And again, if you like any of these videos, I've got about 150, more than 150 videos in this channel. If you like any of them and would like to see this continue, I encourage you to like and subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and most of all, please let others know that we're here. If you know of anybody that might be interested, any tech forums on the internet or any friends, let them know that we're here. Honestly, I put out a video and I might in 6 months get 100 views. It's kind of depressing, but you know, it'd be nice if others could find this and find it useful. So I'd appreciate it. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to start to develop this application. And we haven't covered all the stuff that we're going to need to do this. In future videos, we'll break out some of the specifics we might encounter when we're doing this. But basically, this application is basically a chart, and you've got a button that you press here, and it brings up what looks like a Windows Forms form, a user input form, where the user can enter some values. And these values are for this equation that we are going to plot in this chart. Now, don't freak out if this equation looks crazy. It's kind of irrelevant. I just put some stuff together that we can chart that might look a little bit interesting. But really what we're doing is we're taking some of these values inside this equation and bringing them out to this form so the user can enter. So basically it's just two sine waves that we're adding together, and they have different magnitudes and frequencies and phase shifts. And we're just adding those two and then multiplying them by this exponential. And again, you don't need to know about all this stuff, but at the end of the day, we're putting in some numbers, and we're also determining what's the maximum time we want to plot. And right now, we've got it set to 0.1 seconds. So you can see the chart goes out to 0.1. And what we can do is we can change these values. So I'll put in 300, and I'll put a magnitude of 0.2. And I'll plot it for 0.3 of a second and hit plot, and you can see now it plots for 0.3 of a second, and it's adding these sine waves of these frequencies and magnitudes and phase angles. Okay, so pretty straightforward functionality, but we're going to start figuring out how we're going to implement this in Visual Basic. Now, the first thing we need to do, and I encourage, if you want to be a good software developer and or engineer, good engineers and software developers design first, then build. You don't just jump in, start writing code, because guaranteed you're going to make a mistake and you're going to waste time and have to go back and restart it. So what we're going to do is we're going to think about some of the basic stuff we need in this application in order to make it work. Okay? So we're just going to take a moment here to figure out some of the basics. Now, the first thing you can see is we're going to need a spreadsheet, and we're going to need a button on the spreadsheet, and we're going to need to add a chart. Okay, so add spreadsheet sheet with button and chart. Okay. We won't cover that in this video. We'll do that in a later video. It's pretty straightforward, but just so we know what we got to do. Now, the button, as we saw, when you click this button, it starts up this form, okay? So somehow we're going to have to tie some sort of event with this button to starting up this form, all right? So we'll add that somehow button starts form, okay? So once the form is running, and here's our form, the user enters data. The program doesn't do anything. The user just enters data. But then the user hits plot, okay? And when you plot, it goes through and the Visual Basic does all the work after you hit the plot. So what we're going to need is we're going to have from the form have a plot event. Basically what that means is when you click the plot button, it will generate an event that will start running your code, all right? So today we're going to look at, once you've generated that event, what does Visual Basic have to do to actually calculate, based on the user input, calculate the values and chart it. Also, what it does, which is kind of not really important, but it also puts into these columns, it puts time and value that it calculates. So it's going to calculate, this is a time axis, so in this case it calculates up to 0.1 seconds. So this goes up to 0.1 seconds. You can scroll down and you can see there's about 1,000, a little over 1,000 values of time, and then a value of this equation for each point in time, okay? So let's start thinking about, once you've hit the plot button, what does this Visual Basic code have to do? The first thing generally you have to do is make sure you have add references. In other words, any external libraries of code that you're going to need to do this, make sure you've added it into your Visual Basic project, okay? Now, the next thing is, of course, as with any software, initialize variables. Okay, we're going to have a lot of variables in here doing stuff, and you need to initialize them. Tell the code, is it going to be a double? Is it going to be an integer? This is after we've hit the plot button, so we need to grab user input data. All of these values, we're going to have to grab this data and assign it to variables in our code. Okay? So we're going to grab user input data and assign to variables. Okay? So now we've got the variables we need to define this equation, right? We know what the frequencies are and everything else. So now that we've got all the values, we can somehow loop through and calculate equation for each time step. Okay? So this is going to be the main work, where we're going to just loop through, calculate this equation for each time step, and then we're going to have to chart it. Let's think about how we want to do this. We're going to have all these values. In this case, we're going to have like 1,000 values. We're going to loop through and calculate 1,000 values. What are we going to do with those values? Now, one thing that we mentioned in previous videos is that in Visual Basic, if you are interacting with between your Visual Basic code and your spreadsheet, all the cells, it can take very, very, very long. It can take minutes. And one thing we need to do in our Visual Basic Code is account for that and find some way to speed things up. And we'll talk about that in another video. But one thing you can do is very helpful is to use arrays. And array is, I'll assume that you know basically what an array is. It's basically a variable that holds many, many values. So it's perfect for this. So what we're going to do is we are going to assign data to array. All right, so as we loop through, we're going to calculate the equation, then assign each element to an array. So this right here, these A and B columns here, this is basically an array, okay? It's an array of 2 elements across and 1,000 elements down. So you're basically defining this range of data, these 1,000 values, as an array. So it's basically all those values, like 2,000 values stored in memory, okay? So the reason we want to put it in an array is because with Visual Basic, one way to speed things up is to do all your calculations and you assign your data to an array where you're not interacting with the cells themselves, okay? Keep it within the Visual Basic code and make an array of values, and then once you've populated the entire array, you can spit all those values out to the spreadsheet and update all the cells. So this is going to be one way that we can very much speed up your Visual Basic and your spreadsheet, all right? So now we've got all the equations assigned to an array. What we're going to do is we are going to chart the values, okay? And we're going to spit that array out to the chart, all right? Now, one other thing that we're going to need to do to further speed up our code is all of this work, all of these calculations need to be done without updating the spreadsheet. So for example, we want to make sure that as we're gathering data from the spreadsheet and charting it and we're calculating data, we want to make sure that we don't update the spreadsheet. So there's some other code we're going to have to add to this later on to make sure that when we start our code, we tell the program, hey, don't update the spreadsheet while we're doing this because it's just going to slow things down. And then when we're done doing all our calculations, tell the program, okay, now you can interact with the spreadsheet and chart the values, okay? So that's just to keep in mind. Okay, so now let's give a little bit of thought to this chart the values. We have already gone through, we looped through, and for each element of the array, we've calculated a time and value. So now we've got this 1,000 rows by 2 columns worth of data in an array in memory. Now, how are we going to transfer that to our existing chart? Or basically transfer it to this spreadsheet, fill in all these spreadsheet values, and the chart is automatically linked to those values. But how are we going to take that array data and populate each set of cells in the 1,000 rows? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. You might think, well, I've got this array and I've got this array of cells. Maybe I can just loop through one row at a time and transfer that row in the array to that row in the spreadsheet and just copy from the array to here and copy and copy and copy. You could do that, but there is a much faster way to do it, and that is by assigning the array to the range. There's basically a command that says, okay, I've got this array, I can assign it, all of its values, to this range of cells. So another thing we're going to have to think about, we're going to loop through and calculate the equation for each time step. What's the time step going to be? Are we going to have a fixed time step? What's it going to be? Well, what I've decided is we're going to have 1,000 elements. We're going to limit this to 1,000 elements, and we are going to fit whatever time range into those 1,000 elements. So we're going to have a variable that defines the time step. So if I have a 0.2 second range for the chart, there's going to be 1,000 elements in that 0.2, so each time step will be 0.2 over 1,000. Okay, in the next video we're going to start by converting this pseudocode into real Visual Basic code. And the first thing we're going to do is generate this form and tie it into the button on the spreadsheet. So again, if you like these videos, like and subscribe, hit the bell notification, and please let others know that we're here. That would help out a lot. Thanks.